one of the hot topics on the Convex Discord was the purchase of CVX by Silo, right at the best price available through the.
You timed it
So what's the
perfectly.
story behind that? How'd you pull that off?
You know how
What made you do that?
we're definitely DJs, guys. I mean, you're side of people. We're definitely DJs.
Hear ye, hear ye. It is our honor to welcome you to the KingMaker Podcast.
All right, well, we want to welcome AJ from Silo Finance to the KingMaker Podcast. And want to start with AJ, could you give us an introduction?
Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Iham or AJ. I lead growth for Silo Finance. I'm one of four founding contributors of the protocol, and today I'm a contributor among 13 on the team. So I have a background in economics. I've worked for startups, and today I work with the team on basically everything, establishing the protocol and launching it. And the biggest task that I have working with product and engineering on finding ways to grow the protocol in terms of usage and retention. So attracting users, liquidity, and that. So that's pretty much a little bit about myself.
Awesome. And Alejandro, welcome. How are you doing today?
Good. Good. I'm really good. I'm really excited to talk to him and dig a little bit deeper. Silo's kind of been the talk of the town recently in the Convex community. Seems like all the big players are part of the team or they're contributing. So I'd like to get some inside scoop of what's going on.
Yeah, the other coin channel on our Convex Trading Discord is constant conversation about Silo, it seems.
That's interesting. I don't know. I honestly, I tuned in a few times, and I was surprised. Like really super strong community, and I love that. Yeah, we're honored. Uh, we've got the attention of people in the space, especially the people that we care about, the DeFi builders and the community of builders, and that's super exciting. I'm happy to kind of tell you a little bit about our journey, but please you tell me how you want to like ask me whatever, or we start the conversation any way you want.
Yeah, so take us to the beginning. What's the origin story? Where did this start? Where did Silo start? What was the conception of it all?
Yeah, well, the four of us have been in the space for quite a while, since 2016, I think even before some of us. And been, of course, in DeFi, we've seen it from the beginning, and we've always wondered, is like, okay, what's the problem with lending? Why can't we find borrow lend markets for some of the tokens that we have in our wallets? And we've started um, researching lending protocols, and we've kind of stumbled upon this problem that current lending protocols have limitations. And so we've, I think in 2021, mid 2021, we had started kind of working on concepts. Okay, how do we bring money markets to every single token on the market? We're talking about thousands. And what are the limitations? What are the design or the architecture of that lending protocol? And in I think in August we kind of uh, had this idea of, well, let's isolate risk. And so I'll tell you a little bit about it later. And then we entered the ETH Global. And ETH Global was a great experience because of course, we've done, all of us, a lot of hackathons, especially in Web 2 before. But the idea was, all right, we will not get this done unless we commit to ourselves and to the public to deliver the code base, at least the spaghetti code base or the scrappy one that you do in hackathons. And that's why we entered. And a byproduct of that was, well, being one of the finalists or the winners, number one. Number two, kind of started building community because a lot of people started following us, and we've started explaining the problem, explaining the results of our research. And I'll tell you a little bit about what surprised us actually when we did the research. And then, yeah, that was October. And then we started talking to our friends, the builders in the space, Fax, it was a Tribe, and Reflexer, all the friends in San Diego. And I was like, hey guys, this is, we want to bring money markets to the basically to all token assets. And we kind of like did the seed round, and then instead of going a VC round, we thought, well, it's really unfair to give a bunch of people access to something. What about the rest of the community? So we decided to bypass VC. We respect them. We appreciate the value, but we told them back then, like, hey guys, if you believe in us, just get in the token auction like everyone else. So we wanted to give like fair access to everyone. So really it was kind of like we had some principles and we wanted to stick with them. So one of them was like community first. So we did the Gnosis auction back in December, and everyone could access that. Of course, we had some geo restriction just to make sure that we respected the laws of certain countries. And yeah, we raised some money, and since then we've been writing code and kind of refactoring code, and now we're under audit, and we just expanded the team from really 4 of us to 13, and that was just a huge task, and all within 4 or 5 months, and now we're hoping to launch soon. So that's kind of like our story.
Honestly, I'm really impressed. No, yeah, when I first heard of the problem you're trying to fix, it took me a bit to fully understand the scale of what you're trying to accomplish, because I don't know about Keith, but like when I started doing research to prepare for this interview, I started thinking like, oh, like another, like, no offense, like, oh, another lending market, like what can they do that a couple of OGs like Aave, Compound, couldn't do. But I did realize that you're absolutely right. Like, you go to all these different lending markets, and they're limited, always limited to like around 20 tokens. They don't expand so much further, or you have to go to a couple of smaller protocols like inverse finance or something to get a couple or more like exotic tokens of the lending markets. So this, you're right. So if until I heard I did research and you guys heard your story, it never really occurred to me that, wow, it's the same 20 tokens on lending markets, besides maybe Rari.
Yeah, and I'll tell you a little bit about exactly. So our research, when we did the research, we discovered that at least the people we spoke to, 99% of the people did not know the risk of shared pool lending protocols like Aave and Compound, or even recently, I'll tell you a little bit about it later, the shared pool of, for example, one of Rari's pools. So the problem when we talked to the people, they did not understand that if you, for any reason, or an exploiter, could fool Aave into thinking X sushi was not worth $10, but actually worth $1,000, you could deposit collateral and steal everything in that pool, which is basically the entire protocol. People did not know that. They thought, well, if Aave tells me I can use 10 tokens as collateral, then that's safe. Well, actually, it's not safe because you use one pool for all the tokens. And that people did not understand. So what happened in 2021, unfortunately, bad events had to happen for people to start to understand, unfortunately, and people lost money. back in a cream finance, the exploit that happened. Someone exploited one of the tokens, again, fooled the system into thinking a token was worth way more than it was on the market. So in that incident, for example, just to simplify the example, you fooled the cream into thinking your Bitcoin, or I'm sorry, your ETH was not worth $3,000, it was actually worth $300,000. So he could actually deposit, let's say, 1,000 ETH, and now you've got a gigantic collateral, and then you can borrow everything else in all the tokens in that pool. You borrow BTC, you borrow USDC, you borrow whatever you want, and then you leave your debt behind because it's worth much less, and then you steal that money. So $100 million happened, and then another probably 100, and then before that happened, Venus, the lending protocol on Binance Smart Chain, it's exactly what happened with them. And then people started asking, wow, well, those lending protocols were not as safe as we thought. Well, yes. So yes, they're efficient. You can deposit ETH and borrow whatever you want, whatever listed in that 20 token you've talked about. Correct. But because the efficiency is shared, but the risk is also shared. So that was like the kind of like the aha moment for us. Like, all right, well, if we want to bring money markets for hundreds, maybe thousands of tokens, and I'm sure hundreds of them are going to be super risky, well, we've got to isolate risk. So it was the question for us was, okay, if you isolate risk, if you isolate every single token in one pool, just one, put one token asset in one pool, well, how do you make the entire protocol efficient, right? And this is where we came up with the idea of bridge asset. And that was, and we chose ETH for a reason.
So you just used the B word, bridge. But lots of exploits with bridges in general out there in crypto. Explain to me why this is safe, what you've set up.
Yeah. So it's a bridge asset. It's not a bridge between a chain and another. It's basically just a coincidence that we use the word bridge, but we can simply remove it. It's just basically what happens is if you because each token asset has one market, so ETH lives in each market. So technically, if you have, let's say, a market for CVX, it's actually CVX ETH. And then if you have another market, let's say USDC, it's going to be USDC ETH. So if you want to use CVX as collateral to borrow USDC, you deposit CVX, you actually don't borrow USDC directly. You actually borrow ETH first, and then you take that ETH to the second market, which is USDC ETH, you deposit the ETH, and then you borrow USDC. So this is why we call ETH the bridge, because it's the bridge asset. It's the only trusted collateral in the system. So and maybe this example kind of a little bit difficult, but what happens technically is that you use CVX to borrow USDC, but behind the scene, you're not collateralizing your position with CVX. You're actually using ETH, and ETH is a liquid asset. It's highly liquid. It's trusted. So if something happens, if CVX value drops, I can simply sell that ETH and recover. I'm sorry, I can sell CVX and pay back the ETH that you borrowed. And this is exactly why how we separate risk and how we connect those markets. So ETH becomes the bridge asset, but it's not the same concept of bridging a block chains, basically.
That makes sense. And with people working on liquid vote-locked CVX, you all would be an opportunity, the Silo protocol would be an opportunity for lending of that as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I can actually give you an example. So let's say a month from now, Terra and Frax announce that they're going to bribe $100 million this cycle, right? This voting cycle. and everyone wants CVX, right? Because simply the ROI is going to be high, your API is going to be super high, and you want to collect bribes. But you know that maybe you're not long on CVX. Maybe you're afraid that after you borrow CVX, after a while, if you buy it, I'm sorry, the price is going to drop. So you want to hedge that risk. So you can borrow. You can borrow lock, and then after the lock, you can pay back. So you go to Silo. You go to the CVX ETH silo, and you deposit ETH, and then you borrow CVX. So, but let's say you actually don't have ETH. Let's say you have, let's say you have Silo tokens, right? So you would go to the Silo token, you would deposit Silo as collateral, you borrow ETH, and then you take that ETH to the CVX ETH silo, you deposit those ETH, and then you borrow CVX. In this case, if something happens to Silo, let's say get exploited, whatever, it doesn't matter. Users in the CVX ETH are not exposed to Silo. They're exposed to ETH only. And that's how we separate risk and we secure all the collateral with ETH. So in this case, you just borrowed CVX with ETH, and you borrowed ETH with Silo. So that's why ETH gets in between and becomes the bridge, basically. Yeah.
Can I ask a question that have been happening? So there's one thing I'm confused about. So so you're gonna use ETH as a bridge asset to protect other markets and other communities from getting affected by other tokens, but the risk is still there. So if there's one token that gets hacked and loses millions of dollars, if you're planning to accept every token one day, someone will still have to take the hit. Who's gonna, what I'm wondering is who will take the hit? Silo token holders or I would like to hear your plan about that, because you're planning to succeed where other markets couldn't. But with doing that also means you have to cover for their mistakes or the weaknesses as well, and that's a difficult task to put on yourself.
No, that's actually not what we're doing. The risk is always user bears the risk, the known economic risk. It's a known risk. We cannot bear that risk. So let's take an example. The only thing that Silo does is isolate risk and make sure that the risk parameters are understood. So I'll give you more. I'll give you an example. We mentioned the CVX ETH in this example. So let's say CVX today is at, let's say, at $30, right? And you have $1 million worth of CVX. If you manage an explorer, manage to basically fool the price oracle into thinking CVX is not worth $30, it's actually worth $3,000. You can deposit CVX in this case. Your collateral is going to be inflated, and then you borrow all the ETH inside one silo, inside the CVX ETH silo. So, and then you run away with it. You just steal it. You basically stole a bunch of ETH, right? Using a little bit of collateral, not much. So ETH providers, we call them counterparty risk takers. They are the one that incur the losses, not Silo, not all the markets in the protocol, and certainly not the protocol itself, not the token holders. It is up for the ETH providers, the bridge asset providers, to decide which silo is safe to provide liquidity for. Because if you don't provide liquidity in ETH to the silo, you cannot bridge it to other systems. So you're always dependent on how much ETH you can manage to attract to that specific silo in order to start using CVX to borrow anything else you want in the system. So you need ETH in between, and it's up for the ETH provider to decide the risk and eventually provide liquidity to that silo or not. It's not us. We just make sure that if something happens with CVX, the risk is not transferred across the system like in shared pool design.
Okay, so that makes sense now. So what's in it for the ETH providers?
Oh, well, so let's go back to the example. CVX is hot on the market, bribes are so high, demand is so it's basically actually let's take another example. It's what's for ETH. For ETH, you need to borrow ETH in order to borrow another asset. So you can expect to make deposit APY on your ETH, but this APY will be dependent on how hot the counterparty token in that silo. So do people, is there much demand on actually borrowing that ETH, depositing ETH in order to borrow that CVX or not? If there's a huge demand, well, the interest rate will be less. But if actually there is no demand at all, well, the interest rate is going to suffer. If there's a huge demand, well, the interest rate is going to be high. So again, it really depends on where are you using this ETH. And so let's say, for example, you have USDC ETH pool, and you have a bunch of USDC. So you deposit USDC, and then you borrow the ETH, and then you take that ETH to the CVX ETH, and then you borrow CVX with it, right? Now, what you did basically, you borrowed ETH from the USDC silo, and because so basically interest is going to increase because the borrowing rate is going to increase a little bit, and then ETH depositor starts making yield. So it's basically you're lending money to other people and you're making yield on it, and that's how it works. And again, it really depends on the utilization of ETH inside the silo. If there's huge demand on ETH, on basically I need to borrow that ETH so I can use it somewhere else, in this case, the rate is going to be high. So to give you an example, so let's say there is SHIB ETH silo, and a lot of people have a lot of SHIB, so they deposit billions of dollars of worth of SHIB, right? And now they're ready to borrow ETH against the SHIB, but there's not much ETH in the silo, so the interest rate is going to be very, very high. So you could see a yield or deposit APY on the ETH maybe 25%, 40%, because that silo needs a lot of ETH. Because those SHIB people are going to deposit, borrow that ETH, and then borrow something else with it, right? So again, it's all about the supply and demand of that ETH, and this is why we have a dynamic interest model kind of governing this dynamic.
And the yield and the APY, where does that come from? Is that from
the borrowers?
The borrowers.
Exactly.
It's the actual transactions. There's fees involved to produce the yield, or
no? So like so if you deposit ETH and if I borrow that ETH, I'm actually funding your deposit APY, right? So the borrowing rate is always higher than the depositing rate, the lending rate. So if you deposit your ETH and all of a sudden like you're making, let's say, 4%, if I'm borrowing that ETH, it's definitely going to be more than 4%. So I'm actually funding your deposit, your lending rate. So if you're supplying ETH and there is someone needing that ETH, they're definitely paying you interest for that.
I got it now. My smooth brain is keeping up now.
Yeah, and the more there is demand on borrowing any asset, you can expect that the borrowing rate to increase.
And one thing I'm curious about, hopefully I understood the message. So they're gonna make the APY, but just to make sure, it would be in silo tokens, or would it be if they're in the SHIB ETH silo? It wouldn't be in SHIB, right? It would be in silo
No,
tokens. Their rewards would come in.
no, interest is always paid in the asset that you borrow or in the asset you deposit. So you deposited, let's say, $100 worth of ETH, and then you made some, let's say, some interest. After a month, you withdraw that ETH, and it's gonna be, let's say, $110 worth of ETH, but it's gonna be in ETH.
Okay, just making sure because, like, I mainly have used comp and Aave, and like, for example, you deposit and then you can claim the Aave
Oh, but those are
as
rewards. But
rewards.
those are
Like,
rewards are
yeah,
separate. I'm talking about the paying the interest, not the rewards that you. Rewards are they sit on top of the interest as an extra layer of incentive for you to borrow or deposit.
you're right.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
right.
yeah,
I was confused. This
yeah,
topic's a lot
yeah.
more
No, no,
complicated
that's
than I
fine.
thought
Yeah,
it'd be.
but you pay off your debt in the same token asset that you borrowed, or you withdraw more what you deposited because you've made so much, a little bit of money on depending on how much you made. But when if you supply ETH and then you're making basically interest, you're receiving interest on it. When you withdraw your ETH, you're gonna withdraw more than what you deposited.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Looking forward to these options being available out there. So timeline wise, when is the launch? What are you looking at?
Actually, it's a funny story. You know what? So we provided kind of timeline before, and we failed really miserably because we discovered that it's really not necessarily us that set the timeline. It's basically the audit or the auditors. So we try not to communicate any timelines from now, like really ever. So what happened is, so you speak to an auditor, and then they tell you like, oh sure, we'll start next Monday, and then they tell you like, oh well, we're 30 days late, so we'll see you after a month, and then you deliver your code to them after a month, and then they come back to you after, let's say, 4 weeks with fixes. Like, hey, we found a few issues. Go fix them now. So we go and we fix them in a few days or a week, and then we send them the pretty much the polished code base, fixed all everything. But now they have to review that we've fixed, right? We fixed those bugs, and then they probably go for another couple of weeks because in the interim while you're fixing, they have started another audit, right? Those firms are really small. They have small teams and they work in groups. And then this is why timelines are usually difficult. Not that to blame everything on auditors, of course. For us, it was a journey of also pretty much kind of estimating and making sure that we once decided on the scope, we do not expand it, and we did expand it a few times. So to tell you what's happening right now, we're being audited again by QuantStamp, and there is an audit happening by ABDK, and there are a couple of informal code reviews happening externally and internally. We think the we're hoping that sometime in May, the audit and the fixes and the re-audit is all going to be done. I don't know, to be honest. We'll see. Again, it's the velocity of we are super fast in fixing and corresponding, but again, just to tell you like an example, like QuantStamp should have started on the March 29th. They told us like we can only start on April 18th. We understand it's fine. It happens. Uh, they're very cooperative people, but this, they're companies and they have schedules, whatever. So we don't know honestly, but I'm hoping that it's going to be we'll need a few weeks, of course, after the audit to put together the UI and make sure that smart contracts work and the UI is not buggy and there are enough internal testing and all. So yeah, we'll see. But I'm sorry, I really cannot give timeline anymore because I don't want to disappoint users. Yeah, the community. Yeah, yeah, it's very important to communicate expectations correctly.
Well, just have it done for summer so that we can have a DeFi Summer 22 this year, okay?
Oh yeah, no, certainly, absolutely. Like we're
I would
yeah,
appreciate that.
we're super excited. I look, you know what? So here's what maybe let me tell you a little bit about our vision. So this is just the beginning, and the beginnings are difficult because you're shipping a complicated product, and you're shipping a primitive, meaning it's a base layer. It's like Uniswap. You expect people to build on top of it. Uh, and the first version is going to be a little bit limited, and we're also learning. But the team what we've assembled is superstars, really the best you can find on the market today, and and we have a great understanding of the space. We have great coding capabilities. We have great design capabilities, meaning actually designing the technology and also the user experience. So uh, it's going to be a little bit slow in the beginning because again we are launching beta. We're trying to make sure that we don't screw up things. So slowly we're coming out of beta. We're expanding our markets, and at the same time we're speaking to uh, potential partners in the space. Because remember, like Silo at one point, I think maybe by the time by V2 we will have hundreds of markets. So if you are an ETH depositor, basically again the most important user, because that's the trusted collateral, you will have a problem deciding where to deposit your ETH because you're at will. You can deposit it against in the CVX silo or the USDC silo, or maybe there are 20 markets you can actually deposit, right? So you need a yield optimizer to build on top of silo to simplify it for the user. Like for example, Keith he has let's say 5 ETH, and he trusts 10 markets. He believes that those 10 markets are safe. Let's say CVX, DAI, USDC, whatever, right? 10 of them. So he knows that the price of these tokens is very difficult to manipulate. So I trust them. Well, you have if you go to Silo, you'll have to divide those 5 ETH little for each silo, and that's not a great experience. So you need to a yield optimizer to build on top of it. Now, of course, we can build it ourselves, but we're trying to be very much like what Curve is today, is a base layer, infrastructure layer, protocol, and let others build on top of you. Let others tell you like, hey, there is a vault, and these vaults only take your ETH to disclosed silos that you trust yourself. And then in the background, this vault, it has some simple strategy that always rebalance or always send your ETH to the best APY, just to always make the highest yield possible, right? And they do it in bulk, so you don't have to pay a lot of gas, or the vault doesn't have to incur a lot of gas. So we're of course we have a lot of strategies on there, but eventually we want to be this safe base layer with hundreds of markets, with stable markets, meaning their risk parameters are stable. They do not change. No one can change them because if you created a silo, no one can change like how much you can borrow, for example, or when you get liquidated on those kind of things. So you give the stability that you need, and you let others build on top of you. So it will take us time to get there, but eventually it will be I think it will be a great primitive that yield optimizers and projects like Convex and other partners in the potential partners in the system can basically plug into to make it even better.
So you brought up a Curve, and I appreciate you bringing that up because that sort of leads into my next question for you. Tokenomics. One of the beauties of Curve is their tokenomics. As you are that base layer, as things do grow, can you explain to us the tokenomics of Silo?
Yeah, so we're working on them today, and the tokenomics is great. Uh, uh, it's not necessarily the solution for every lending, every protocol. It depends really. You have to kind of study it a little bit. For example, Curve rewards liquidity providers because obviously you need deep markets to. Uh, uh, that's number one. In our case, uh, we will be rewarding borrowers, not depositors, because you want people to borrow, not deposit. Again, remember, like borrow, the borrowing rate that a borrower pay funds the lending rate. So and so meaning that if I reward uh, the borrower, we are actually indirectly rewarding the depositor. So we have like a different, of course, business model than an AMM. So first of all, our at least this point that the entire community agrees to, which is we need to borrow the user that the most important user, which is basically the one who is borrowing, right? Because if you manage to get $1 billion of ETH, but no one is borrowing, well, that's a problem, right? Um, so that's number one. Now, number two, we're looking at all right. So if we give some rewards to borrowers, what do we require them to do? So, for example, Curve tells you, well, we give you boost if you're willing to lock your basically Curve. I mean, I'm talking about the early days before Convex. Again, it is just a basic idea. So you lock for a week or a month or a year or 4 years. We're discussing today if this 4 year lock makes sense at all. There's a lot of argument against it, um, and there are a lot of arguments for it actually. So we're discussing this in the community. The question is, it's extremely difficult to stomach as a user, to stomach the idea that I'm I'm buying Silo from the market to lock it for 4 years to get a discount or to get basically a boost. So my borrowing rate goes down. I mean, who knows what happens after 4 years, right? I mean, in DeFi, it's really difficult to predict what's going to happen in 4 weeks. So, so that's kind of like the twist that we're looking at right now in tokenomics. However, the V model in itself, which is you have to lock in order to receive the incentive, definitely works.
One thing I wanted to say that I did talk with a bunch of people in the in the server the Convex server, was that I definitely do agree with that. I think a lot of people are starting to say that VE doesn't fix everything and it doesn't make everything magically work. Um, so I definitely understand where you're coming from. Is that, and I respect that you say maybe it's not the right thing for you. Um, it's still, yeah, I still think it will make, if you decide not to go that path, I think everyone will still be curious what route you would go to though, regardless.
Yeah, yeah. I think veto economics. We will definitely go. Not definitely. It really depends on. It depends on many aspects. The community is convinced that the V model is good, but then you don't necessarily apply all of it. You don't necessarily go for the 4 year lock or the tiers, right? So maybe you give the max boost for a lock of 6 months, right? So you start from 1 week to 6 months, not 4 years, right? Because uh, if your max boost can be obtained at a reasonable lock, again, few months from now, probably more users will lock easily. If we decide to go for the carbon copy of Curve's tokenomics, you definitely need a catalyst. You definitely need Convex because Convex is the exit strategy for those users who cannot stomach the 4 year lock but need the maximum boost. And here's what we need to think. We need to definitely. I mean, I personally love what Convex does. I think it's a great utility. I think it provides so much value, not only in basically exiting if you want to exit or getting the boost without committing for years, but also in terms of user experience. The experience is good, community is strong, so um, and they have proven to be a wise voter. They have protected the Curve protocol pretty well. They have helped grow it significantly. I think they're very wise people and they understand the significance of and Curve, and they understand the responsibility as well. But then back to the V model, you don't necessarily apply every aspect of it because maybe I don't know why the Curve people went all the way up for 4 years. I personally don't know. I would be interested to knowing why. But as in essence, basically, is asking people to lock for an incentive right now, the maximum boost is a great idea, and that's the essence of the V tokenomics, basically, regardless of how the maximum duration you offer.
So digging a little deeper into your current token distribution, can you talk to that a little bit? Being retail folks here, Alhenio and I, we're always worried that we're going to end up getting dumped on. We jump into something and we don't realize
Yeah.
there's only 2 wallets that hold everything. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, honestly, people ask us all the time. Well, those people, they're 2 VCs, and I didn't know who they were, honestly. They just got in the token auction. So everyone asked us, like, what happened in the token auction? Obviously, back then we were not known that much. So in December, we started the auction, I think, around the 7th. And we priced the token at 10 cents. And we had, and then up until I think it was a Gnosis auction, by the way. It's a Gnosis auction, a Gnosis batch auction. So technically, so to tell you a little bit about the batch auction, it's a fantastic idea. We wanted everyone to pay a single price for the token at the end of the auction, but we wanted the users to discover how much it is. So basically, you could, in the day one, say, I'm willing to pay 15 cents. Someone else will say, like, I'm willing to pay 21 cents. But at the end of the auction, we kind of average all the bids that we received, and everyone pays the single price. So if you bid more, you just receive more tokens, but your average token average price, the average of your token price you pay is very much like everyone else. So everyone at the end paid 0.000075 ETH. And at the last 30 minutes, these 2 basically whales, what we defined them back then, just aped in with large basically orders, and they got a lot of tokens. So one of them is Arca. We got their permission to basically dox them, and the other one we have not got their permission. And they're pretty well known and respected in the space. Pretty nice people, and I talk to them all the time, and they support us in both. Actually, they support us. So I don't know really what their strategies are, to be honest with you, and of course they don't disclose that. I dump. That's why we're basically trying to create a deep pool, and so I don't think they're gonna dump in the sense like, oh, go sell 10 million tokens. No, but might they sell? I don't know. Maybe, yeah. Well, they will sell a little bit, but that's why we're trying to create like a deep pool, so at least the selling of the small amounts will not impact the price of the token. And I don't think it's going to be the case that way. So but to kind of make sure things are safer for the user. So in June, the seed investors start unlocking, the founders start unlocking, but we committed to the community. We said all the team, the entire core team, will not sell at all until even maybe after, but until we committed until December 1st, which is the 1 year anniversary of the protocol, just to kind of assure everyone. But I'm sure when we had the V-Silo, we will just lock all of us and start participating in governance. But again, this is just kind of to tell the community that, hey, don't worry about the core team, but we cannot guarantee that the uh, others don't sell. Yeah, but they're responsible people. The two big wallets, I can tell you that, responsible, and they understand what we're trying to build. And I think everyone at one point they want to recover the capital, but I know that they're not going to do it at the expense of the community and what we're building.
I definitely appreciate you going into debt like that and definitely looking after the community and the community that you're building, because I can vouch that that was one thing that people were concerned about, and when people show your token, because obviously everyone usually shows their bags a little bit, right? That is one thing that they say is risky about the token. Like back in the day when I was doing my research over these past
Right?
few weeks. Um, so I
Yeah,
definitely appreciate you
yeah,
disclosing and
yeah.
going into depth
Yeah,
about the topic.
absolutely. But what can you do? I mean, it's a permissionless token auction. It's very much like buying from Uniswap, really. How can you enforce people not to buy? And they just believed in us, honestly, I think. And that's why they kind of uh, uh, aped with the large amount. But they're also, Arca is also big into Terra and many, many other projects. So, but yeah, that's how it is. So we have to live with this, but hopefully soon when we have the V silo will have emissions, the governance base is going to expand.
Excellent. So let me ask this: right at the best price available through the.
You timed it
So what's the
perfectly.
story behind that? How'd you pull that off?
You know how
What made you do that?
I mean, we're definitely degens, guys. I mean, you're silo people. We're definitely degens. Like we're hardcore DeFi people. So when we know how to make decisions. Honestly, so if you look at what had been happening, we were discussing the problem of liquidity. Silo is not liquid enough on the market, and we want users, and we have a lot of interest into basically again becoming into expanding uh, the community. But how do you expand the community if it's difficult or slippage is so high that you end up paying a lot if you want to buy the token, right? So we thought, well, okay, great. We will find a solution to build deep liquidity for Silo. But how do we do it? Providing liquidity by direct liquidity. Do we go for a tokamak reactor? Do we go for those Uniswap v3 whatever apps that sit on top of it? And so we've pretty much kind of scrutinized every single solution, including buying CVX to to basically vote for curve emissions through Convex. So we kind of the community decided that CVX was the right thing, but CVX was kind of a little bit expensive, or we pretty much didn't really care about the price of CVX. We thought, okay, next we will spin a snapshot, vote, and we will then ask governance for the money, which takes 8 days and plus two delay and 10 days. So that's going to take like about 2 weeks to finalize, and then we will get the money in the development fund, and then we go and start buying it in batches to basically control slippage. That was the idea. That was like, okay, so we discussed it, but we were about to create the snapshot. And then as community member, Firebrand, he's big in CVX. He's one of the nicest people I personally have met, talked to. You guys talked to him. But yeah, so it's community member. He happens to be also a large, he's also very active in the CVX community. He actually initiated this idea. He said, well, guys, obviously you want to buy CVX. Well, this is the best time to buy if you want to buy. And it was a Saturday. It was actually Friday. I'm sorry, Friday, end of week. Like, okay, how do we go about this? So I thought, well, okay, this is a good decision. This is a good time for sure. We've talked to people we've talked to Sam from Frax. We've asked him for his opinion. We've this is the first time I tell people. We've asked other OGs in the Curve Wars, and they said yes, it's a good decision. I knew it personally. The team knew it, but obviously always want other people's perspectives. And then I talked to the largest token holders, the top five among the people I know. So I don't know every token holder, the top one. And I asked him like, "Hey guys, how do you feel about us aping into this using development fund, and then asking the DAO to reimburse us?" This is a huge no for me personally in a normal situation, because I like to community to make those decisions. But then you could not wait 14 days for it, and certainly you could not wait even 2 days, because there were proposals popping up in every single community, like Terra, like, "Hey, let's go buy, it's the right time." And we felt the pressure. We felt like, okay, those guys is gonna scoop those Convex, the CVX tokens. Well, goodbye, $16-17, right? And they definitely have larger bags. I mean, we're a small DAO. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna be scrutinized for this. The community is gonna, and especially if the price of Convex keeps going, and I think in that day that was pretty much the expectation, is like, okay, it's gonna go to 13 or whatever. I thought like, all right, well, my reputation is personal one. The team's reputation is basically is kind of will be questioned. And the worst case scenario, if the DAO does not vote for us to reimburse us, well, we sell them. And I knew that it was oversold. I personally wanted to get in, but I'm trying to be where I am right now. Personally, I wanted to get in as well, but that's a separate story. Anyway, so we decided, let's go for it, and we started buying really with the development fund. I got one of the founders. I told him like, "Hey, stop coding, just go sign transactions." And we went in and we tried to find the best price, wait. We waited and waited for a couple of hours, and then the next day, of course, all happened in our breaks and his breaks, because he's like, "Hey man, I need to code." It's like, "Don't bother me with this." It's like, "All right, cool, but we need to buy this. This is gonna be good." Like, okay, at $17, if it drops to 13, they're gonna crucify you. I was like, no, let's.
It's definitely nice hearing the thinking process
Yeah,
along this is really
yeah. I was just
entertaining.
telling you, like, it was just, and I had so much to do that day, and and it was like on my mind. Oh man, if it drops to 13, it's a problem for us. But actually, if we wanted to drop to 13, we were going to buy even more. But anyway, that's so we basically decided, and when we decide, we know that decision making. When you decide, you have to complete that kind of strategy. So we had a strategy for it in a place, and actually the strategy was we wanted to go for actually for about 5 million, not 4.4, what we ended up paying. But then we thought, based on calculations that we did, that we had a small model on we thought that was enough for the size of pool that we want to build, which is about 10 to 20 million of silo depth, TVL. It was enough. And then, yeah, so it's like, hey, so Gnosis auction, Gnosis wallet, hey, go sign transaction, go on, and they, oh, this transaction failed because we did not respond fast, because you're buying on 1 inch or whatever. And yeah, so we continued on Saturday, and we ended up with the 250,000 CVX, and I think that was a fantastic decision. I can tell you, like, this, to be honest, this wouldn't have happened if wasn't the urgency wasn't initiated by Crypto Condom, and without basically the consult that we got from our friends in the space. Like, hey, this is a good decision, because we are not traders. Honestly, we're focused on building silo, and so you want this perspective, like, hey, this is a good decision. But we had told everyone, like, hey, we're going to buy silo CVX, but the question is, like, when do you buy it then? So it just the window opened, and we were wise to make the decision. We weighed the decision pretty well, and then go for it, and it worked.
No, yeah, I definitely could think it worked since you guys originally bought the token. I would like to think, I haven't checked the price recently, but I would like to think you guys are close to doubling your money. If you guys bought at 17, last time I checked
Yeah.
was 29 to
Yeah,
30.
honestly,
Yeah, you're like towards the
yeah,
way
to
there.
be honest, we don't ever track the price of CVX, but for us, because it's a strategic hold, and we want to, at one point, we want to look back and 4 or 5 years from now, and we want to see like a diversified, strong treasury, not only in CVX but other projects. But we definitely don't track the price of it. But we like we have like small voting power, and and it's good to use it for to basically expand our nurture our community.
No, I definitely see that. And since I don't know many devs and stuff like that, I really like. Of course, the way I think of it as a retail user, right, is going to be different than as you guys. You guys see it as probably you said
Yeah, absolutely.
strategic.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah. One thing I was actually wondering. I was I this I told Keith before the show. I actually wanted to ask, is that to bring in, I know stablecoins are not too much really what we're talking about here, but Sam, the strategy that Sam from Frax has, I thought it was really interesting. Where he's a lot of people, I think, were surprised when he went with the friendly approach with basically all stablecoin protocols, even though like a lot of stablecoins are like in a sense competing against each other,
Right.
right? They're competing for liquidity, emissions. So they were surprised. I was wondering what is going to be your approach of, against other competitors, because you guys are not the only ones in the space. I was wondering if you guys have
Yeah.
any idea
Yeah.
how you gonna go about it.
This might surprise you, but we actually like competition. We love the idea that users have multiple, will have actually choices to lend. I personally think that you should never use one lending protocol, especially if you're an active user and you have obviously a large investment. You should use multiple protocols so you diversify your risk. You should never use Silo only. So Silo, we're positioned in this space where we're secure first, and then maybe we're a little bit less efficient than Aave in some extent, but we're definitely more secure. And so, as a user, if you want to, let's say, have 30% of your portfolio in a secure place, you'll probably use us. If there's some protocols where they provide, let's say, great opportunities, like let's say one of the pools of Rari's pool, you definitely use it as well, and you make that, and then you use Aave as well or Compound for something else or whatever lending protocol. I personally think that this space is so like huge that there are opportunities for 10, 15 lending protocol to innovate and bring more markets to more assets and kind of really even plug into each other. And to be honest, that's actually one of the things that we think will happen. You'll see a lot of liquidity flowing from Aave to Silo, from Silo to Aave, and even to Rari. And that's the beauty of it, right? Yes, you're competing, you're building, but everyone else is benefiting. And that's the beauty of DeFi. Anyone can tomorrow actually kill all lending protocols and simply take over. And if that's a better solution, absolutely, why not? I'm a DeFi user first. Yes, I'm a Silo as like probably second. I would love to see the ecosystem growing and to even match and overtake TradFi. But yeah, but this doesn't mean that you don't stop building. But at least I think we know we have like I think we're positioned in a well in a market. So I think will be a little bit difficult to kind of attack us there, in which is a long tail secure money market. And But we definitely need to keep building in order to kind of pretty much say protect our position on the market.
So, last question. It is 2025. Everything has gone exactly per your plan. What does perfection look like?
Okay, perfection is that Silo has 5,000 money markets. They're all isolated, and you could use any token asset in a secure way to borrow another. the users well educated as to the risk of lending and borrowing uh, in Silo and beyond. And DeFi is at a couple of $1 trillion of financial activity. That's kind of perfection for me.
Love it. All right. Well, AJ, we appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us, and amazing conversation. Any final words?
Well, I appreciate it, of course. I love what you're building, guys. We would love to support you like in any way. You're also builders, and we appreciate your effort. My message is pretty much to the Convex community is that of collaboration and I think in 2025 we'll look back and see Convex as also the meta governance, the main one, the wardens of not only Curve but also other important protocols that plug into the Curve ecosystem. And again, thank you so much for your time.
Kingmaker